Welcome to What's After Next, where each episode we bring on a new guest to talk about disruption and innovation in their respective industries. This week I'm joined by professional recording artist and award-winning filmmaker Wyatt Gross, aka Wyatt Monroe, aka Cubehead. Wyatt, thanks for joining the show.
Heath, thanks for having me, man.
Absolutely. So I know that when it comes to disruption, you have personally experienced the forces of disruption in your own career. We'd love to just start there and have you talk about what particularly COVID did to the music industry and the effect it had on your career.
Yeah, COVID sucks. COVID sucked for a lot of people.
Yeah.
Especially I think people in the entertainment industry, specifically people whose kind of whole career relies on massive gatherings of infected people, minus the infected part, but during COVID that was, so that sucked for really any musician at all, but specifically, the smaller time musicians that had, plans to go on tour and promote their album that they had just recorded, like me specifically. Yeah, it sucked,
So you got signed and produced your first label-backed album.
Yeah.
And then COVID hits.
Right. Yeah. It was pretty unfortunate timing. I'm thankful that the opportunity was given to me in the first place, because that not a lot of people get that opportunity. So that was that's really cool. But obviously it was really unfortunate timing that right before I was supposed to actually start playing shows and go on tour, that kind of all got canceled or postponed indefinitely. So yeah, I guess you could say that was disruption, just because it was like a lot of it was like you work really hard to like achieve or to get to this point, and then you're kind of it's kind of like yeah, it sucked.
Yeah. Gotcha.
It was terrible.
Do you think that, obviously COVID was a major disruptor to a lot of industries across the board. Do you think that the disruption that COVID caused specifically to the music industry, do you think that those disruptions and the impact it had are long lasting? Or do you think it made significant changes, or do you think that eventually everything will just kind of return to the way it was pre-COVID?
I think something like a worldwide pandemic it makes things more extreme, but I think for the most part, things are constantly changing. Society is constantly changing. Human behavior is constantly changing. In fact, it's accelerating. Like, the changes are happening faster these days, So I think it's kind of impossible for things to ever go back to how they were, not just pre-COVID and post-COVID, but even just like in general, like, even just like with the invention of the internet or like smartphones or like social media, it's like, there is no like going back to the way things were. Like, things are constantly changing. So yeah, whether or not they change for the better or for the worse, that's kind of up to interpretation. There's definitely good things that happened and bad things that happened. So I guess it really depends on who you're asking. But me personally, I think, I think it's a little bit of both. Obviously for me specifically, it was not great, and but it's whatever.
So for you, it was not great because you had produced the album, you're supposed to go on tour. Tour gets indefinitely postponed because of COVID. Did you see other artists or out there that you felt like actually were able to pivot, or even to survive, or thrive, or maybe even like thrive in that new environment that COVID created? Anybody jump out to you that you felt like somehow they made it work? I don't know how they did it, but or maybe you do. Like, anybody come to mind?
I mean, one of my favorite artists, who's Hajango Records, or Hajango, I don't know how you pronounce it, but Jacob Collier, he did his thing. Like, he like kind of took the time to work on his next album a lot, and also like, he couldn't have artists in the studio, so he would just have them record, their vocals or whatever, like at their house, and then send them over to him so he could put them in his song and like mix them. And then he also used that for like music videos. So like, he cleverly made all his music videos off that record, like in a way that, the artists were never like in the same room together, but you can tell, like, when that it happened during COVID, you're like, oh yeah, that makes sense that they're like in their own homes and they're like shooting this. But like, it doesn't feel like, it feels purposeful. So it doesn't feel like it's like a hindrance. And also, since he's just sitting at home making music and not really able to, go on tour and play shows for a bunch of people, he made a series of videos during that time that were like, he basically like live streamed on YouTube. And he would just break down like the Logic sessions of his song, like some of his songs. And for me, that was like super cool because, not only is he still being able to like interact with an audience through like the chat, but also, like, it was really cool to like have someone like him like break down his like thought process, and even like the like real nitty-gritty like specifics of like different techniques that he used. Like, he'll break down like a 3.5-minute song and it'll be like an 1.5 hour long video. So it's super interesting for me because I'm like, I'm like, oh, I gotta write this down. Like,
Yeah. So he pivoted. He couldn't perform live, so instead he essentially stepped up his game as a content creator.
Yeah.
But also still all about his music and breaking it down. That's
right.
Cool.
Yeah.
When you were talking about that, it made me think of Bo Burnham's special as well.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Yeah, that's definitely a masterpiece, inside. There's nothing I can say that hasn't been said about it. Like, he really hit the nail on the head, not just with what he was saying, but like, how he wasn't acting. Well, I'm sure he was acting when he was like, pretending to be like, like the Welcome to the Internet song. I'm sure that's an act because, he's obviously not being genuine there. But like, all the like kind of like other shots where he's just kind of like in the fetal position, like, talking about like, just like his thoughts. It's like, yeah, that's pretty relatable, man. Like, it definitely, I have a lot of respect for that because it's like, it's hard enough to like write a really like honest song when it comes to like you dealing with like emotions, because it's like, this is kind of therapeutic and it's nice to be able to like get this out there, but also like it's kind of hard because it's like you realize you have to like share it with a bunch of people that you might not, feel comfortable doing. But then it's another step further to like, literally in like its most raw form, just like essentially treat a camera like it's like your therapist, and you're just like, kind of like making like a personal video diary, but you're literally putting it on Netflix for millions of people to see.
Right.
Like, that takes a lot of like fearlessness.
Yeah, it was pretty genius how he, in one sense, it's he created a time capsule. That show was very much a COVID era show, very much. But then in typical Bo Burnham fashion, you got, you're laughing with him, at him, whatever. But then he can bring you to tears because it's real. I mean, what the stuff he's singing about is, you know, he's got that amazing ability to make you laugh and cry within a very short period of time. But also watching it, you're like, this is our world. And it, as I remember, it was both created and released during COVID. It wasn't like it came out 5 years later. It was like right smack in the middle of it.
I think that's actually one of the benefits of COVID. Like pre-COVID, like there was still like, you know, artists and just people in general, like they were aware of like mental health and like depression and stuff like that. But I feel like during COVID and post-COVID, like people and, you know, artists specifically have this like self-awareness to it that's like it's very intentional. Like they want to bring it to the forefront, not just like, yeah, this is sad and this is how I get over it. It's like, no, I'm going to see a therapist because I was depressed and this is how I'm feeling. Like Bo Burnham obviously did that with his special, like, because, you know, I was a Bo Burnham fan like back like when he did like Words, which is his like first, like I think it's his first like Comedy Central like special. I remember I was like in the mood to watch some comedy, so I watched 3 specials in one night. I watched some like Dane Cook garbage, some like I think I watched like Zach Galifianakis like Purple Onion or something like that. I forget what it's actually called. And then I watched Words, and that was actually the one that I was kind of least interested in, just on from looking like at him, because, you know, at the time he was like rocking the like Bieber haircut and he kind of just looked like this young kid. So I was like, this is probably gonna be cringe. Like, but then, you know, after I watched it, I was like, wow, that was pretty amazing. Like, I wasn't expecting all this like musical comedy, but also this like kind of internet age, like sporadic like humor, you know, definitely like non-traditional, as opposed to, you know, the opposite of that, of like Dane Cook, of just like going up on stage and like making a bunch of sex jokes.
Yeah.
So, like, yeah, it's like,
Yeah.
dude, it's so tired.
Well, then it's not surprising if you think about, like, in that sense, Bo Burnham has always been innovating and pushing the envelope. And so it makes sense that when crisis hits, COVID hits, the world shuts down, most artists are running around going, well, I guess I'll just take a vacation because I can't do anything else. Yeah. Makes sense that he's the guy that's like, I'm going to lock myself in a room for
and
weeks.
Then, even in that, Inside, he even talks about how like he stopped doing shows because he would literally have like panic attacks on stage and stuff. And like, you know, as a fan who's been following him for a while, that's like really eye-opening, because you're like, wow, like I didn't even realize, you know, that was happening. Yeah. A similar artist that kind of is like kind of made a point of this is obviously my favorite rapper of all time, Kendrick Lamar. His latest record, Mr. Morale and the Big Steppers, it's, you know, very vulnerable, and he opens up about like some very personal things, and, you know, opens up about going to therapy and dealing with like all these like, you know, very personal things. And so it's just cool that, like, you know, I don't know if pre-COVID people would be doing things like this, you know. I don't know if people would be so open about anxiety and depression and addiction and all this stuff. Like, you know, it definitely seems like it was like a time of just like such like desperation, and like, you know, it was a bad time. So like, you know, coming out the other side, I feel like people are way more aware of just like, you know, the importance of like not only taking care of yourself and like, you know, making sure your mental state is good, but also expressing that so like other people can like relate to it and feel like they're not completely alone in like dealing with that, which is extremely powerful. That's like the whole point of like art, right?
Right. I never thought about that in the sense of like, I mean, obviously within music, people have been writing songs about their emotions since music was created. That's obviously a conduit for that. Right. But I think, you know, when I think about that as a byproduct of the COVID disruption in terms of bringing even more rawness to the forefront, but then also not just bringing the emotion, but in the context of mental health. I think you're right. I think that's something that we talk about a lot more today, and understandably so. During COVID, it was like that we had to worry about that. People were locked in their homes for years and kind of going crazy. So yeah, absolutely. So okay, let's moving away from COVID specifically. Just kind of talking. We've talked about some things that those guys did to innovate during COVID, but let's talk in general terms about innovation in the music industry. Are there other artists or creators that you see that, in your opinion, are really kind of leading the way in innovation within the space that you think are kind of the pace setters or the front runners?
Yeah, I mean, pretty much, the two I just mentioned, Kendrick and Jacob Collier, it's like they're definitely like on the forefront of, like the other day I was watching one of those Logic breakdown sessions of Jacob Collier, and he was breaking down one of his Christmas songs. He does Chestnuts Roasting on an Open Fire, and just like seeing him talk about it and like work through it, it was like, wow, this truly is like, I feel like if like some of the like great composers of like old Beethoven, Mozart, like I feel like if they lived during this time, like this is exactly what they'd be doing. Like, obviously they worked with like orchestras and choirs and had to like compose music like on a piece of paper so like people can perform it. But if they had like today's technology, I feel like they'd be doing this exact thing, because it's like, very experimental and very like human, because it's like, I know we're gonna talk about AI later, but like there's something about like humanity that's like it's just like, I think there's just something about it that, as far as I can tell, is just impossible to like fabricate. Like, just like, yeah.
Well, I wasn't actually planning on talking about AI, but we certainly can if you want to. Okay. Absolutely, yeah. I mean, we can go down that road. Obviously, that's a hot topic these days. But we let's come back to that. I want to, I think about in the past, for musicians, I think getting signed by a label was such it was everyone's goal, because with very few exceptions, if you didn't get signed, you really couldn't be successful. It was no way to get your music out there.
Right.
Obviously, technology, the internet, social media have changed all of that. And as you were talking, I was thinking, in the old days, under the old system, even under cable, right? You had to have, you came up with some idea and then you had to go pitch it, pitch your idea. So you're saying, Jacob, if he had to go pitch this to MTV and say, hey, I want to run an hour-and-a-half show of me just sitting there breaking down my music.
Right.
Would that have ever even made it? Or
right.
Bo Burnham, I'm going to lock myself in a room for weeks or whatever that, however long it was. But then, when I think about some of the stuff that we see now on YouTube and other things that are like, this would have never gotten picked up by the networks, but it's amazing. And so, and I know you're a huge consumer of YouTube, and thoughts on that? I mean, do you agree with that statement, and any other examples you can think of?
What statement?
That technology, specifically the internet and streaming services, have opened up. Have kind of opened it up and made it more, and democratized the process of how we are entertained every day.
Yeah, I mean, definitely, for sure. Yeah, like before, like you said, you had to commercialize yourself to be, like, you have to package yourself in this nice little box so, your corporate overlords can sell you to people and make their money while you also make some money. But these days, yeah, all you need is a computer or a phone even, and maybe a camera, maybe not even a camera. Like, you know, you just need like things that these days pretty much everyone has anyway. And you can, you know, reach a huge audience, you know. So, yeah, I mean, that's definitely a good thing, but also it can be kind of a bad thing just because, you know, it does mean that there is there's definitely an increase of, you know, artists, and I say that very lightly because...
Artists, you mean?
Right, yeah,
Right.
because, you know, these days it's like, you know, in fact, Channel 5, one of my favorite journalists, Andrew Callahan, I recently went to one of his live shows, and he had a Q&A, and one of the audience members came up and he was like, "How do you always find people that want to freestyle in your video?" And he was like, 1 in 5 Americans have bars. And I died laughing. I was like, ain't that the truth, man? Like, I'm going to music school right now, and the ratio of, you know, people who can play a musical instrument versus people who can't, but like, you know, are a rapper and like have a SoundCloud and like have songs, it's probably like 95 to like 5. Is that a ratio? It's like 95%. Like, I'm not gonna say talentless because there is a lot of talent, and you know, I will never bash like an aspiring creative. You know, I'm not gonna be that guy. Like, because I hate people that are like that. If they're like, "Oh, you can't sing, you sound trash, your music sucks," it's just like, okay, yeah, that might be a little true, but like, it's all subjective anyway, and like, wouldn't you rather like be constructive and be like, hey, maybe you should work on this, maybe you should practice this, maybe you should do this instead? Like, that is so much better than, you know, just being like, you're garbage. But anyway, it's definitely interesting because it's like, you know, there's a very low bar for entry these days, but you know, it is what it is. Like, if you can make a career off of like doing the bare minimum, like work-wise, then like, you know, I'm not gonna hate on you. I probably won't collaborate with you because you don't really bring anything to the table that I can't already provide myself. But, you know, go for it, man. It's not like it's affecting me at all, you know?
Yeah. It does seem like, I mean, obviously there's always been taste in music and people have different things they like or whatever. But I know when you and I sit down sometimes and we're watching YouTube or whatever, or listening to Spotify, you know, before you turn on the radio and there was music, it's already curated for you. Somebody has already gone through the process of determining what is good or bad in their opinion. Same thing with television. You turn it on, and of course there were the networks and then cable. And today though, it's like you said, anyone with a phone can now create music. They can create videos, and that's awesome. Again, it increases accessibility, which is a beautiful thing. On the other hand, it does, especially my generation that I'm not consuming as much as you, makes it very hard to find the good stuff. It's like that's why I like watching YouTube with you, because you've already curated it for me. You've already sifted through all the crap, and I get to see the good stuff. Yeah. Not everybody has a you sitting around that does that for them. So, true. But it definitely has impacted the industry in that way. So, you know, I think about like TikTok, and I know when we were watching the ball drop, and you were like, "Oh, she's a TikTok artist." It's like a whole new way. Didn't even go through, maybe didn't get signed or not, who knows, but here they are breaking out TikTok songs. Yeah.
Good old Chinese.
Own TikTok.
Chinese surveillance app. Gotta love it. Yeah, I have a lot of strong feelings about TikTok. You know, again, it's similar to my whole, like, if you don't really have a lot of talent but still can find success, like, good for you. I mean, not saying that like TikTok stars don't have talent. Like, they definitely have talent. They have talents that I don't have, as far as like, you know, every day being like, oh, today I'm gonna, film this piece of content, and the next day I'm gonna film this piece of content. Like they're constantly just churning out content. The problem with that is it can't all be good,
Right.
Like there is no filtering process of like, like when you film a movie or write a song or like make an album, it's like months of work and listening to it or watching it and saying, maybe I should do this instead. Maybe I should do this. And then even at the end, you're like, it just goes through so many different like possibilities and like, so at the end it's like, okay, I'm finally satisfied with what I've made, and there's it just it goes through a longer process. Whereas obviously like filming a video every day, like that process is not there. It's very just like, okay, I'm gonna film it and then I'm gonna post it, and then tomorrow I'm gonna do the same thing, and I'm just gonna keep doing the same thing.
And not that they're not doing some editing and things like that, but you're
Right.
saying how much can you do in
Right.
in less than 24 hours?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I think a parallel to that would be like some like YouTube like sketch artists and like comedians, because they'll post probably like once every 2 weeks, maybe like once every month, and like you can tell that they like put thought into it. They wrote a script or even just a light idea, and then it's a lot of like improv, but and even those people will have what I would refer to as like shit posts, where it's like very low effort, but it's still funny because it's like the concept is a funny thing, which is cool. But yeah, I really don't consume a lot of like TikTok content. I feel like it's like I'll be like scrolling through like some YouTube shorts, and what people are doing now is like reaction content, but they literally add nothing. Like they don't even talk. Like it's just like here's the video that they stole, and then here's like their little webcam in the corner, and they're just like. And it's like, how is this real? Like they are literally probably getting money from this.
Yeah.
From taking someone else's content.
There's no value add.
Putting it, and
Yeah.
like, yeah, it's like, it's one thing to like react to something, like at least like be funny or like be some type of entertaining, like add something to it. But to just sit there in front of a camera and just do exactly what I'm doing to you, like how is this even legal? Like how are you getting views and probably money by literally just sitting in front of a camera, like watching content?
Because you're saying, I mean, obviously there have been like music reviewers and movie reviewers around as long as there's been music and movies to review, but you're saying like they're not even doing that. They're not even adding any value to it at all. They're just consuming content, and we're watching them consume content. Now, obviously some of those reaction videos are funny because they do react and stuff, but I know you've showed me a couple where it's like, yeah, this is not, I'm not sure how this is supposed to be entertaining.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's a bunch of like usually younger people who are just like, that's how they pass the time. Like, they just, and it's designed that way, right? Like it's very easy to just scroll and scroll and scroll and like not actually like think about what you're doing. And then like next thing you know, like 3 hours have passed and you're just like, oh wow, I've literally done nothing for 3 hours. I mean, I'm definitely guilty of that. So it's not like I'm criticizing it. I'm not really criticizing the people that do it. I'm criticizing the, people who are pulling those strings. Like it's very intentional that it's, you just can't stop scrolling for like 3 hours. And like,
the algorithm is real and it's good.
It's absolutely, it's terrifying, honestly.
Yeah. Well, and I've heard that part of the reason that TikTok has been so successful is not necessarily because the content is that much better, but because their algorithm is so much better. That people say the algorithm is just so pinpoint accurate that they're constantly serving you content that is exactly what you want, as opposed to not that Instagram's algorithm isn't good and some of those other ones, YouTube, but apparently TikTok's is at another level. Again, maybe it's because they're always listening
Yeah,
they,
definitely.
they know what you want because they're always listening.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't speak to that just because I've never had TikTok, so like I don't really know how good it is. I'll watch like YouTube shorts, and that's okay sometimes just because there are creators that I like on there. You know, a lot of like chefs who just do like very quick edit like videos of them like cooking something, or this one guy, he's Romanian or something like that, but he's like a chef, and he did for December, he did 25 days of Christmas dishes, but each day was like a different country, and he built this like big like advent calendar that had like a bunch of numbers in it, and then like each day he would like poke through, because it was like made out of like cardboard, he would like poke through the number and then reach out like a card, and it had like a flag on it and like the country, and then he did that every day, and like that was super interesting to me because I'm like, oh, it's cool to like learn about other people's dishes, and then he would like make them and then eat them and like rank them at the end. And that's the kind of stuff where I'm like, see, that is daily content that you're filming and producing and putting out there every day, but like it's thought out. Like
Yeah.
you planned to do this, like you scheduled it, so like, oh, every day I'm going to do this, and like that's great because it's good content. It's just when you do it every day and like you don't actually plan anything, it's just kind of like, well, we have to put out something today, so it's like, well, let's just do the dance that everybody's doing, or let's just sit in front of a camera and watch a popular video and be like, ha ha ha, like, but yeah,
All right. I want to talk about one of your other hobbies,
sure,
video games.
love it.
So, from a musician's perspective, do you feel that video games are doing a better job incorporating and leveraging music, or do you feel like they are missing the boat, or anybody stand out at you? Just would love to get your thoughts on that intersection.
Yeah, I think video game music has always been like top tier. Like there has never been a game that is like a classic that like has bad music. Like developers understand the importance of not only sound design but also music. Like it goes hand in hand with video games. Like even back like in the 80s when it was arcade, like they're still putting bangers on those like literal tiny chips that are like, probably like 2 megabytes of like data, and it's still a bop. Like
Yeah.
that's insane. But yeah, I mean, as the industry has changed and we go from like, oh, this is a video game, it's very gamey, blah, blah, blah. Obviously these days, you have a lot more like super cinematic, like almost movie, well, like they are like movies.
Yeah.
So, you can kind of be less like, it's like composing a film score.
Yeah.
It's the exact same thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I think that's super dope because, like one of my favorite soundtracks is to The Last of Us, because I forget the composer's name, but he like has a lot of like Spanish guitar type vibe, and like they always know like the perfect times to put it in, like right on an emotional beat, like hit him with a little ding-ding-ding-ding. And it's like, dang man, that's like so awesome. And then I know Bear McCreary got a bunch of accolades for his work on the God of War game that just came out, and that music is just like insane, like total epic, just like Viking roll, like chanting and like super epic. Definitely is immersive, but also like you could just listen to it like on the bus and feel like a god. And then like the Doom soundtracks are sick. I could talk all day about like amazing game soundtracks, but
I liked how in Last of Us 2, which I just beat, as you know, obviously the soundtrack's amazing. All that stuff is good. but they even went so far as to incorporate you playing the
Yeah.
guitar in it,
Yeah.
which was just like it's like a cool extra thing
Mm-hmm.
that certainly wasn't needed.
Right.
But not only are you like minor league playing, I mean, didn't have any impact on the outcome of the game, they're just
Well,
showing you.
I mean, at the end.
Well, what
No
I mean
spoilers.
is how you perform it doesn't really affect
Right.
it. Thank
Right.
goodness, because as you know, I'm a button masher, and so
Yeah.
it doesn't really work for me. But but it was your playing is very much an integral part of the story. I mean,
Yeah.
it's part of it, which
Yeah.
is great. So you have great soundtrack, great music, moving the plot along,
Right.
all of those things, setting the mood, and then you're playing the guitar yourself, which doesn't impact the story, your performance of it, but then, yeah, it's actually considered as part of the story, which
Right.
is cool.
And it's not just some shallow, like, oh, you're walking through a music store and there's a guitar sitting there and you're like, oh, I'm going to go and press triangle and play it, like in a mini cutscene that means nothing. Like,
Yeah.
It's more like, oh, there's a reason for this. There's a story reason for this, and like to get specific for that, it's like, oh, this is like, reminds you of Joel, and like it's kind of like how you keep him alive because he was a guitar player and he taught you how to play, and he gave you a guitar, and so whenever you play guitar in that game, it's like it has a lot more meaning than just like oh, let's have them play
Right,
guitar.
right,
Like,
right.
Very purposeful, very intentional use of, music in that game.
Can you play any of the songs from it?
I could play the main theme, yeah. Nah.
So another one that I think of, and this is going back, but I remember the first time how blown away I was when I first played Rockstar's Grand Theft Auto Miami Vice, and how you could
Vice City.
Vice City, yeah.
Yeah.
How you could change the radio stations.
Yeah.
I mean that
Yeah.
even back. I mean, of course, that was way back in the day, but all of a sudden, it wasn't just here's music in the background, but you got to select it
Yeah.
and choose it, and then of course they integrated the commercials and some of that
Yeah.
humor and stuff too.
Yeah.
Yeah, super great use,
Yeah.
and they still do that today, right? of
Yeah,
course.
I mean, the use of licensed music in games is always cool. Like, there's a reason that they shell out like probably millions of dollars to get like licensed music in a game. For Grand Theft Auto, it works, in multiple ways. In one, it's it's nice, especially like more modern games, because it's like, oh, I'm like driving around the city, but I can also like put on my jam, because I think in that game there's like probably over 30 stations, and they keep adding new stations.
Yeah.
So like back when the game released in early 2010s, it had a lot of music that was like popular at that time, and now you go and play it now, and it's like a bunch of like like Lil Uzi and like a bunch of like more like modern type of stuff. So it's like that's definitely one aspect of it, that it's just like nice to like not have Spotify like on the other tab, just like listening to music while you play games. Like, oh, it's all in game.
Yeah.
But obviously, the more important thing that it adds is immersion, because you're like, I am literally in the game, listening to the radio stations. I'm jamming to a song, and then maybe you get in a wreck and you fly out the windshield. Like, you can still like hear it playing from your
Right,
car.
right,
like
right.
that's totally awesome.
Yeah, and that to me is so much more effective than, I don't remember which year it was, but as you know, I used to be a big Madden football fan.
Yeah.
And I don't remember which year it was, but they made this big deal about they had gone out and signed all these artists, and they were going to have all this music on there.
Mm-hmm.
But it doesn't add to the immersion. It's just menu. It's music at the menu, and it's
Yeah.
like this isn't adding any value. I'm not saying it's not appreciated by some, but for me, it was just like you went and spent a bunch of money to throw a bunch of artists' names on there, and there's some good music on there, but like
Yeah.
it's just menu music. It's
Right.
not the same thing as
Well,
having
it doesn't
play.
happen like during the gameplay.
Right? No, not at
So
all.
it's it's like it's used as just a way to not make it so during the menu music it's like silent,
Yeah.
or it's like something they composed, which besides the like already licensed like NFL ta-da-da-da-da-da, like
Yeah.
I don't think they even like make music for that game. I don't really play those games, so I might be wrong, but Yeah. I mean, one thing to say though, like one of my favorite games growing up, and still, Tony Hawk's Underground.
Yeah.
Obviously a skating game, but you know, and that's not like, it's not like your character's like wearing headphones and like he's the one that's hearing this.
It's true.
But it's still immersive because it's like, you know, they curated the playlist so it was like what a skater would be listening to.
Yeah.
In fact, a lot of that music, I would hear artists for the first time and not even realize it's that artist until I go back and like look at the soundtrack and I'm like, holy crap, like that's MF Doom like rapping. Like I didn't even realize, like I was listening to such bangers as a, you know, 7-8-year-old kid playing this game. Like, you know, it is definitely like influential, and it's just like whoever is in charge of like doing that is,
Yeah.
they have really good taste, and they get my shouts out at you. I don't know who you are, but whoever, I'm sure it's multiple people. I'm sure it's
Yeah.
literally just the developers, and you know, they're all probably just like these chill dudes who are like skaters anyway, and they're probably just like, yeah, this is what I've been listening to, let's put it in the game.
Yeah.
And you know, most of them are like pretty underground artists, so they probably don't even have to pay that much for it. But
Yeah. Well, like you said, I'm sure it's the whole licensing thing now is it's an industry within an industry.
Yeah.
Within video games, music, that convergence, and then signing those artists and stuff.
Yeah. And then I think an interesting thing in your interview with Mike was he talked about how a big trend right now in movie trailers is doing cover songs. And I think that's funny because it reminded me of in The Last of Us 2 when Ellie sings Take On Me. And I'm like, so that's not just a movie trailer thing. Like that's just a trend right now in I guess video games too. Like
Yeah.
you have a voice actor who's playing a character who's singing a cover song of a real song in this made-up world. So it's like, you know,
Very meta.
yeah. Or it's just, it brings a sense of like, oh, I guess this is like our same universe. Because if Take On Me is a thing, then
Yeah.
you know, I guess, you know.
Well, it's good to know that in a post-apocalyptic, zombie-infested, anarchy world, that we'd still be having
Archaic.
Well, it was.
Shouts out the Archaeas.
Yeah. That we'd still be going around singing.
Yeah.
Take On Me.
Yeah, and in the first game, they after they leave Bill's town and they get the truck and they're driving to Boston. I forget what exactly. They're driving in the car. Ellie breaks out all this stuff that she stole from Bill, and one of the things is like an old like cassette tape, and she hands it to Joel and she's like, "Does this make you all nostalgic?" And he's like, "That's actually before my time." He's like, "That's a winner though," and it's like I think it's like Hank Williams Sr. And so, you know, that's licensed music, and also, yeah, I love that stuff.
All right, so before we move off of that, any other games jump out as really setting the bar high on the music side, or either licensed or created for it?
I mean, Persona.
Yeah, all right.
Persona has some bangers.
Now, is that licensed, or are those?
No,
okay.
that's original music. But yeah, that stuff is so good.
Half-Life.
Half-Life. Well, really any Valve game is. They know what they're doing.
As does Rockstar. I feel like they consistently.
Yeah, Rockstar has some good original music too. Like the San Andreas theme is like iconic at this point.
Yeah.
In GTA 5, they have a lot of like ambient kind of like menu music and like loading music. Super like, it's just like super ambient, but like it's still slaps. It's just like you could listen to this while you're like studying or doing whatever. Like, yeah, I mean, again, I could literally talk all day about video game music. Yeah, two of my favorite things, like married. Like,
Yeah.
That's.
Now, is that something you would ever be? I mean, I know that you.
Oh yeah.
Okay, so.
Oh yeah.
That's something you would like to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think it'd be super dope to make a game.
Yeah.
completely. It's just obviously that takes a lot more, learning and work, and you kind of have to devote a large part of your life to learning how to do that. Whereas like I kind of already have the skills to make music
Right.
for video games. So
I liked heard the other day about the creator of Telltales, right? Wasn't he a musician first, and then isn't that what we just learned?
I don't know. I didn't hear about that.
Oh, that's what Mikey told us. It was
Oh.
Telltales.
I don't think I was there.
Oh, my bad.
Yeah.
Well, when I remember when I was playing some Stardew Valley.
Oh, I forgot about Star.
Yeah, I mean, come on.
I have that whole soundtrack on vinyl.
Yeah, it's good. It's good.
That is that is especially cool because that's all made by one guy.
He wrote it all himself.
Yeah.
In addition to making the entire game, he does all the music.
Yeah,
and
a good
those
game.
songs
And a great game.
And I'm not even like I love Stardew Valley, but compared to other people and how much time they've put in it, I just barely scratched the surface.
Yeah.
But I certainly had enough hours in it that. I mean, those songs. I mean, I still hear them all the time. They're just like they resonate constantly. Yeah. It's good music. What's the song? What is the other game? I always forget the name of the game. The other one that you love, the Western one. The heck?
Red Dead?
Red Dead. Yeah. That's another Red Dead.
Yeah. So obviously they don't have radio stations,
Right.
because it's like the 1800s.
Right.
Although that would be cool. You're like riding your horse around, you just like
Turn the knob.
Yeah.
But there's still like the music in it, of course, and the sound.
Yeah,
itself,
there's
all of that.
there's the composed music, which is awesome. In fact, when I was in high school, I wrote a 10-minute play. I wrote and directed a 10-minute. Did I direct it? No, I wrote and starred in a play that I wrote. What? I wrote this play that I wrote, but it was based in that lore, and all the characters were like characters from the game. And then I even used like one of the songs from the game to like open up the play, but anyway, I digress. But that game also has occasionally it'll have licensed music as well, like very occasionally, and when it does, man, it slaps. Like it's one of the most memorable parts in Red Dead Redemption, the first game, is, I think it's like after like a good portion of the game. I think it's like 75-80% way through the game. You have to go home to your family, and like that, the whole kind of theme of that game is you're like doing all this stuff, so it's redemption. Like you live this life of crime, and now you're doing all this stuff to get the government off your back, so you can like go back home to your family and like live this honest life that you as the character like really wants to go back and do. But anyway, you go through like a majority of this game, and like you're doing things for the government and blah blah blah, and then there's this part in the game where you just have to ride back to your farm and like go see your family for the first time in the game. And during that ride, they play this song, and up to this point, you haven't heard like licensed music. You'd only heard like the game's music, and it's this like, and it's like this like kind of like low key like acoustic singer songwriter jam. But like as soon as that dude starts singing, you're like, oh man, dude, like this is emotional. I'm like going back to see my family. And I think your mission objective is literally just like go home or like something like that's like that. And yeah, Red Dead, good stuff.
Yeah. When I think of now it's old now, but the innovation at the time, of course, it was super innovative. The Guitar Hero and of course Rock Band stuff. I mean, do you remember when we first started playing that stuff? Like, it was mind blowing. Like, it was the cool, because all of a sudden it made being a musician and being a rock star, at least pretending to be one, again, very accessible. Because I certainly can't play any instrument. Well, harmonica, I can play harmonica. That's about it.
Kazoo?
Cannot play a kazoo, only a harmonica.
You could play a kazoo.
Maybe.
You just gotta hum into it.
Okay, well, I can
and
hum.
blow into it.
But all of a sudden, I'm playing guitar and I'm singing and
Sure.
I'm playing drums and it was like, and that blew up. Of course, it was everywhere, and then it sort of faded. I guess everybody got burnt out on it, but
yeah.
And now all the equipment's, they're all collectibles, and
Yeah.
still on the video game music.
Sure.
Convergence there. Just want to get your thoughts on some of these virtual in-game concerts that I know you showed me some clips of a Fortnite concert.
Yeah.
Is that a one and done thing? Do you think that's the future of music? Is that going to be a way to sort of counter the next pandemic? Like, where do you think that has in like, what is its place long term in the music industry?
I mean, I think it's really cool. Like when I like experienced one, or I logged on the game and it was happening. And it's definitely a cool feeling because it's like, it's live and like everyone's there in the moment. So, I think it has its own merit, and obviously it's very different, going to a real concert. But yeah, I mean, it's definitely a cool thing that is possible now, especially when they're, specifically in that game, like they're very like high production value, and they utilize, like they take advantage of stuff that you obviously cannot do in real life. Like, make your character like fly around and like, just like it's definitely it's definitely groundbreaking. Like, it's one thing to watch a concert on like TV or like something like that, but then it's another thing to actually experience it, although it is virtually. Like there's still like some type of layer there that is definitely cool. I think it would be super sick to put on a virtual concert like in a game. That'd be sick.
Is there anyone else besides Fortnite doing that?
Yeah, actually, at the Game Awards, they had this one artist on, and they said, make sure you log into, I forget what game it is, but they were like, go log into this game, this like free-to-play game, and this artist is doing a concert.
Same idea.
Yeah.
Same idea.
So it's definitely, I'm pretty sure Fortnite was like the originators of it, or maybe they were like the first one to do it successfully. But yeah, it's definitely like becoming a trend now, specifically for like, free to play, like multiple people, like online games, like stuff like that. Like,
I mean, I love that they took the risk again.
Yeah.
Like that could have been awful, been just crashed and burned and been like, this is awful. But it seemed like it got a really good reception.
Yeah.
Again, like you said, it has that immersive element.
Right. Yeah, I mean, there's something, obviously Fortnite specifically like has its flaws of how it's affected the game industry as far as like how they monetize things now. But it's definitely brought about this new genre of like live service games, which can be a bad thing and a good thing.
Yeah.
Like bad thing when you release a game that's not finished and you're just like $60, and throughout the year it'll get more and more finished. Whereas back in the day it was like, okay, whatever's on the disc and we're shipping out, like that's the game. We can't patch it.
Cyberpunk comes to mind.
I mean, pretty much every AAA game these days, not everyone, but like it's very rare these days that a AAA game is released that's in like a completed state.
A ready state. Yeah.
And usually the developers that do release games like that are finished are like the top tier developers, Rockstar, Naughty Dog, stuff like that. So, yeah. But
besides besides virtual concerts through, multiplayer online games, anything else you see, say, on like the 3 to 5 year horizon in terms of the music industry, not specifically to video games, just music in general? Anything else you see that you are saying, hey, I think this is I mean, when you look at music industry, you're like, okay, well, we saw the impact of digital and this sort of stuff, and then we saw, music sharing platforms and what they've done to the industry with Spotify and Pandora and all those. Anything you're watching and saying, I think this is a trend, this is something that we're going to see impact the industry down the road?
I mean, so obviously, like, what the trend is now is to, like, make a song that is like a TikTok song, right? And usually it's not even a full song, it'll be like a 30-second snippet. And in a lot of cases, it'll be like sped up or like slowed down or like something like that. So, obviously, I don't really care for that because, music is so much more than just like, background noise to your content.
Mm-hmm.
But, it makes you wonder, like, obviously good music will always be around. It's not like just because something is popular that like the other stuff doesn't exist. So, but it does make you wonder, like, with, the newer generation, the popular music being this like very, tightly packaged like thing, it makes you wonder, like, if that will push them in, the opposite direction as far as like the music that they like, stuff that's more, it's kind of the same idea as like a lot of like modern rap these days being pretty shallow and just about like very like things that like a lot of people can't relate to, but it makes them like feel a certain way. It's like after consuming this much music, like, will you ever like maybe will it make you like maybe if I actually like listen to music that is relatable and comes from like a more vulnerable place or more like human place, as opposed to just like putting on a front, like, it makes you wonder, like, if like, if they get pushed away from the like shallow stuff and into the deeper stuff, just because because like before, you didn't really have a lot of choice in like what you listened to.
Right.
Like
you turn on the radio, you got what was on there.
You turn on the radio, or I mean, you could buy CDs, but still, it's like you could only buy like what was at your local CD store, or
Mm-hmm.
like and to get there, you already had to like usually be signed, and like pretty much the only way you could actually get music from like non-commercialized artists was if you like saw them playing out, and they were like, yeah, I burned some CDs, or like I burned some tapes.
Yeah. Bootlegs and stuff like that.
Like that was pretty much the only way to like experience music that wasn't already commercialized and monetized.
The first time I ever heard NWA was a bootleg tape somebody had, and I was like, what is it? Because there's no way I would have, it was like 1988 or something, that I would have heard that on any of the local radio stations or any of that kind of stuff. The only way I was ever going to hear that is someone popping that thing in my tape deck.
Right.
Because otherwise, no exposure. Where today, with the internet, you've got access to everything. It's like right there.
Yeah.
All right, very cool. So, what are you working on now? What kind of cool projects are you doing?
Well, right now I'm in school for audio engineering. I'm collaborating with a lot of other artists, which is nice.
Well, let me pause right there. What's that like being? It's like being in school. I mean, you self-produced a couple of albums before you got signed by Rox Hill Records. So you did that, and they were great albums. And you get signed. You get 2 albums produced under Rox Hill. And now you're back in school doing audio engineering. What is that like? I mean, that's just got to be a wild experience.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely. I'm definitely the only one there that has experienced that. So not to mention I'm like on the older side of people who because a lot of them they're fresh out of high school. They're just like going to college for the first time. And I never went to college because I knew that. For my dreams and goals, I didn't need to go to college. But, you know, I was just kind of like, well, there's a lot of things about music producing that it would be nice to actually have like a formal education on, just because, you know, it's a very broad thing. Like, it's like any other practice. Like, you could take years and years and years of courses on how to record music, and like you still would like barely be scratching the surface of like everything that's possible.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I just wanted to, you know, to go to school and just enhance my knowledge, get a better perspective of like what's, you know, professional and what's amateur. Because I've always kind of lived like in a space in between, which has its own appeal, because like it's not so glitzy and overproduced that it's like it's sterile, but it's not like, you know, absolute trash of just like recording like voice memos of you like rapping over like a YouTube instrumental that's like playing off your computer. Like, you know, I like to live in that healthy medium of, you know, it has a charm of being DIY, but it's also, you know, I'm obviously always working towards the more professional, but, you know, if I could be like right like at the like 75% mark, where it's like you can tell that, you know, one dude made this, but also it sounds as good as like any other record that's like a multi-million-dollar record, you know, like,
Yeah.
that would be cool. Because then, you know, you have full control over every aspect of the music. Whereas, you know, when I was signed, that was still kind of the case. So I guess I can't really say that, but I'm sure other artists who are signed to bigger labels definitely have like less say in like the end product of what their music is going to sound like. It's probably more like Stockholm Syndrome, where they're like, you know, their producer is like, oh no, this is what's going to sound good. And even though they might not agree at first, eventually they're like, you know what, they were right. This does sound good. It's like, does it sound good, or does it sound like what everything on the radio sounds like?
Does it sound like money?
Yeah, exactly. Does it sound like, yeah, your label can profit off of it?
Yeah.
And, you know, I'm not saying all popular music is bad. It's just, you know, it's nice to be able to, you know, to have options. Nice to be able to be like, well, you know, I'm going to do everything I want to do, but also I want to have the knowledge to do it at an extremely high level.
Yeah.
Not to mention, you know, you don't have to pay a producer like thousands of dollars, because
Yeah.
you can just do it yourself, which is also way more satisfying.
Yeah, yeah. So projects.
Yeah. Yeah, you know, I'm still working on like hip hop stuff, still like making beats. But right now what I have kind of, the goal I have set on the horizon for 2023 is working on an album, a full-length album, a concept album, that's more like personal, like we were saying, more like raw and emotional and vulnerable. I want to do something like that, just because I've always kind of been like, not the most stable person. So it would be nice to, you know, make something that is that level of you know, vulnerable. And also just because I haven't played shows in like years, and I love doing that. So I really want to work on new music that I want to play out and get people to listen to. So that's what I'm working on now. I have like a few songs that are like roughly kind of like put together, but I'm definitely going to, you know, start putting in some real work on actually like, you know, recording it and making it. And yeah, hopefully that happens this year. I mean, I really want it to happen this year. Just because, again, I also like haven't really released any new music for a while. So yeah, that's pretty much what's going on. Get my degree, release an album, you know, start playing shows again. And that's pretty much what I have planned.
Great. And for the music you've already produced and released, obviously Spotify is you've got your last two sort of singer-songwriter albums on there under their the name Wyatt Monroe,
Yep.
right? So Wyatt Monroe, if you want to listen to that.
Spotify, Apple Music.
Right. What about your? I mean, you've got some sick music out there in the hip hop rap. Where do they find that? Where do you? I know it's a little harder to get to because it's not on Spotify.
Yeah.
Where do they find that?
SoundCloud.
Okay.
SoundCloud. Just look up Cubehead, and there's all the profile picture is a white background with a black drawing of a cube and a face.
We'll throw it up. We'll throw it up.
Right here. Right here. Just put it over my head.
Yeah, and you should definitely check it out because some of that stuff, I mean, I know some of it's older you did when you were even still a teenager.
Yeah.
But those two albums are some of my favorite albums. Just incredibly good music. So.
Thanks.
Cool.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks for coming on the show. Super cool.
No problem.
Peace out.